Because it is existential, what is required in order to break through is leadership. Without leadership, we have nothing. I could identify for you 5 men who, over the course of 40 years, between 1920, 30 years, 1920 and 1950, wreaked death, destruction, havoc, as well as offered peace and security on most of Western Europe. 5 individuals. 5. We should never, ever believe that leaders don't count. And in the Arab-Israeli arena, they count big time. Because without leaders who are masters of their constituencies, who are masters of their political houses, very little can be achieved. Very little can be achieved. And that is the story of peacemaking, such as it has been over the course of the last 50 years on the Arab side, on the Israeli side, and certainly on the American side. Number 2, when America has succeeded in the Arab-Israeli arena, that success has been very rare. I heard again today, as I hear every day, that America must do something. That only America has the key, the capacity, the will to do something. And I'm not here to argue that with you. Maybe yes, maybe no. I just want to point out that the sum total of American successes on the Arab-Israeli issue boil down to essentially three successes. First, the 3 disengagement agreements negotiated by Henry Kissinger in the 18 months between 1973 and 1975. Second, the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty, which Jimmy Carter had a great deal to do with delivering. And third, a peace conference which lasted 2 days plus in Madrid, which reached no agreements. And I don't want to trivialize the event. It was an important event, but it was not the departure point for breakthroughs. That's it. That is the sum total of American success. And I take my standards of success very high. Success not only means not failing, success means actually creating new realities that were not there before. And make no mistake, the world's most compelling ideology is not nationalism, not capitalism, and it's not even democracy. It's success, because success generates power, and success generates voters and followers and constituents. Failure does the opposite. And I would submit to you that for the great power, there is a risk in trying and failing. Because every time the small power says no to the great one, without a cost or without a consequence, the street credibility of the great power diminishes and declines. During these 3 periods of our success, we enjoyed a good deal of street credibility, both by virtue of our power and by our diplomatic skill. I would submit to you today that for the last 16 years, 8 under Bill Clinton, for whom I worked, and 8 under George W. Bush, I only worked for him for 2 years, for Secretary of State Powell, a man I admired and respected. America has not been succeeding. America has been failing in war, in my view. I mean, after all, the standard for victory in Iraq and Afghanistan is not can we win. That's a foregone conclusion. We cannot win. The standard for victory in Iraq and Afghanistan is when can we leave. For a great power to be caught in that kind of situation, invariably, particularly at the hands of smaller powers, in an asymmetrical war, is not a good place to be. When we succeed in Arab-Israeli peacemaking, we are respected, we are admired, we may even be feared. And I use the example of Jim Baker. I worked for 6 secretaries of state. I liked them all and respected them all, and they all had their qualities and their strengths. Jim Baker was the best negotiator I'd ever seen. When Jim Baker walked in the room, I don't care where it was. I just saw Nabi Berri today and reminded him that we had seen each other in Zahla with Baker way back in '92. When Jim Baker walked in the room, his interlocutors were on the edge of their chairs, like this, wondering, what was he going to say, or worse, what was he going to do? The interlocutors usually are like this now. They're comfortably situated in the back of their chairs. That's not good for America. It really isn't. And success requires people to admire and respect American power, in my view. To have a successful negotiation, this is my final point about the past. And again, I don't want to, I'm not here to sell you anything. My days of selling are over. If you find this analysis useful and you want to turn it over in your minds and think it through, fine. But I've persuaded myself that to have a serious negotiation to succeed requires 4 elements. It's very simple, really. Number 1, you need leaders. I made that point already. Number 2, you need urgency. Without urgency, there is no way or reason why Arabs or Israelis would want to take the existential risks that are involved in making some of these decisions, or the political risks. And urgency requires 2 things. It requires a sufficient amount of pain accompanied by a sufficient amount of gain. Without the marriage of the 2, it's almost inconceivable to me that you could force Palestinians, Israelis, or Arabs into doing things that amount essentially to violating their sense of political identity or their security. Pain plus gain. And every example of an American breakthrough saw a balance of the 2. That defines urgency. Creating a set of circumstances where people are in a hurry. You also need element 3, which is a deal that does not exceed the carrying capacity of either side. Our victories and successes in the peace process, however consequential they were, never exceeded the carrying capacity of either side. The disengagement agreements were done under pressure. Syrian, Egyptian, and Israeli forces were deployed. Both sides got benefits, incentives and disincentives, but it was doable. The governments involved could actually do these things. The Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty in the end, and both Sadat and certainly Begin recognized it, was a separate peace which did not exceed the carrying capacity of either side. And Madrid, of course, as tough as it was to put together, and it required almost 10 months of on and off negotiation, was really all about process. I don't want to trivialize or demean it, but it was about process. And it allowed each side to continue. Today, well, let me move on to the future before we get involved in today. And finally, the 4th factor. Even if all of these 3 are in place, leaders who are willing to lead, urgency that propel them forward, and a set of agreements that they could actually achieve, you need a 4th factor, and that is the effective mediator. Because history has shown that with one exception, the Israeli-Jordanian peace treaty, which was negotiated more or less secretly over a period of months, in which we played almost no role in the substance of the actual negotiation. We provided debt relief to the Jordanians. We provided auspices for the Washington Declaration in 1994, and the president showed up in October for the signing. That was an Israeli-Jordanian deal. With the exception of that agreement, most every other agreement that lasted involved an American role. So America's role is central. However, again, I would argue, over the last 16 years, 8 under Bill Clinton and 8 under George W. Bush, we have not found the right balance as an effective mediator. That's not the reason that Arabs and Israelis don't have peace, but it is a critically important ingredient if we're going to get there. And the role of the mediator must strike the right balance between reassurance on one hand and toughness on the other, particularly as it involves the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And I want to say a few words about that. But these 4 factors are absolutely critical. Now, it's now April 27th, 2010. Barack Obama has been president for roughly 15 months. Where are we now? Looking at the past and looking at the future, where are we now? Let me make a few observations. Number 1, this is a potentially transformative president. I'm writing a new book called Can America Have Another Great President? Whether he'll be one or not is far too early to determine, but there's no question that he has already succeeded in becoming a consequential president. Healthcare alone, no matter where you stand on one side of the issue or another, is one of the rare moments in American history where a transformation has actually taken place. This man has changed America forever, even though the Republicans do not agree, and our debt may ultimately reshape this judgment. But this man has changed America forever for the better already. And that is, in my judgment, one of the definitions of greatness, to change America forever for the better. Lincoln did it with the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. FDR did it, Franklin Roosevelt, with Social Security. Lyndon Baines Johnson did it with Medicare and 2 civil rights bills. This is the most important piece of social legislation since the 1960s. So you have a potentially transformative president who, for reasons that are not entirely clear to me, believes deeply and passionately in the importance of Israeli-Palestinian peace. There's no question he's come out louder, harder, and faster than any of his predecessors on this issue. He's been tough with the Israelis. He's been engaged. But he faces a problem, which is simply that what he wants, a conflict-ending agreement between Israelis and Palestinians on Jerusalem, borders, security, and refugees. And let me be very clear, because I do not want to be misquoted. A conflict-ending agreement in the way I just described it, on the 4 core issues, Jerusalem, borders, security, and refugees. All other issues are subordinate to those 4, including settlements, in which an Israeli prime minister would stand up in the Israeli Knesset and a Palestinian president would stand up in the Palestinian Legislative Council and say the following: we do not love you. It may take a generation or more to create a basis for reconciliation, but my conflict with you and yours with me is over. All claims have been adjudicated. All irredenta have been abandoned. The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians is done. In my judgment, the chances of that kind of conflict-ending agreement being realized, the chances of that happening are slim to none. Now, other things may happen of some value and some consequence, and maybe Barack Obama will help deliver them. An agreement on borders, which defines June 67 lines with minor modifications and one-to-one swaps of equal size and value. Maybe a long-term ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. Maybe. But the notion that the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians will somehow be resolved? This, to me, is not an honest assessment. Given what we know to be the case, and I cannot look at this situation with a straight face and a clear conscience and argue the alternative. I would like to, but I can't. And that's the problem that the president has. He has raised expectations. He's created a sense of his own transformative capacity. Question is, can he produce? Because without leaders, without a sense of urgency, and without a prospective agreement that both Benjamin Netanyahu or another Israeli prime minister. I had a piece in the LA Times not long ago in which I argued that maybe the administration was pursuing regime change. In effect, that's what the policy was in Israel, and how odd it was that this term is usually associated with America's adversaries and America's enemies. It's not associated with America's friends. And I posited the notion that the fact that we don't intervene in Israeli politics is about as absurd as the fact that they don't intervene in our politics. The fact is, we intervene in each other's politics a lot. And we have intervened in Israeli politics on at least two very important occasions. One, Jim Baker with housing loan guarantees in 1991, and a second time, Bill Clinton, during a very heated electoral contest between Shimon Peres and Benjamin Netanyahu. You remember that period because it resulted in the April 1996 confrontation here. Yeah. But I can't, in good conscience, argue to you, and will not. If reality changes, I will change. The central question Obama faces is, can he compensate for the absence of leadership, urgency, and will in the region with his own leadership? Now, I think not, but I'm perfectly prepared to entertain the possibility that in the next 6 to 8 months,